Hey, so finally I'm going to be making a video going over the challenges from my Patreon Discord. Uh, and I just want to say beforehand, there wasn't a lot of finalized entries, only two that were in the sheet, and then a few other things that people did. So I'm going to critique everybody, and to the two people who finished their projects, they're both going to get a shirt. And yeah, you guys made some cool guns, so I'm going to give some critiques on them. And then at the end of this, I'm going to announce a new challenge. So, yep. All right, let's get into it. So, first person is going to be, and I apologize if I destroy your name with my poor pronunciation, Credis, Cred, Credidian Estani, I hope. And yeah, you can check his workout. I'll link it under the post. I really like this weapon, and I really like this render. Go check out his art. It's cool. So yeah, go check out his stuff. This is the gun he made for the challenge, and we're gonna be giving that critique right now. So, all right, my biggest critique at the moment, and let's just focus on the design and modeling aspect, since that's what I care about the most, more than say the renders or whatever. The first thing that I would say is that I would really like to have a little bit more edge highlights on stuff. I feel like a lot of your edges are very sharp, and I feel like you didn't maybe bevel a lot of them. I think I have some viewport shots in the chat, so let me go check that out really quick. See if I can give some more clear feedback here. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, here. All right, so this is actually more important to me. All right, yeah, so my feedback will be definitely still the same. Like I noticed there's a lot of places where there's no even small bevels. And I would suggest at least using a round shader at the very least. And the reason why is that it's just gonna make it feel very. It just doesn't look good in 3D when you don't have hard edges. And it makes it look like it's kind of lazy. I think 3D artists, especially, like we get used to seeing some sort of edge highlight. And typically, even objects with extremely sharp corners will have some sort of highlight. And I think it's always good and important to exaggerate them just so that things read nicer and it reflects the light more interestingly. I think this is something it's one of my biggest pet peeves in general, and I think it cheapens the look of stuff. So, yeah, I would try and bevel your edges a bit more. Overall, I think it's a really unique gun. I like that you separated a lot of these things. I like how it looks like this part, is manufactured with some sort of CNC, and then it's got this more tech piece. I like the breakup of values and colors. I think that's cool. Proportions are nice. But yeah, my biggest thing, first of all, is those bevels. And the second thing I would say is I think it's not a bad idea to just remove a lot of this random detail and try to maybe be a bit more focused with it. So one of the things that I would try and do to focus the design a little bit better is I would try and integrate stuff more interestingly. So for example, you have like this switch here, and it's a good idea and it's important to have this. But what I would do is instead of maybe, let me cut it out. What I would do instead of just having it sitting there and being small and mixed in with all these other details is I would integrate it. And so it looks a little bit more like, let me find it darker. So it starts to make like a form change. And it looks more like the shape is being supported by the design of the gun. And so it's kind of inset here. And I think it's going to look a lot nicer. So the next thing that I would also do is I'd also try and think about interlocking details. So it's really important when you have like two pieces intersecting to figure out how do they mix together. There's a few different ways. The first way is to just have like a straight line. So like if you look at an AK, right? Let's pull up an AK. And this goes for just shapes in general. So AK-47, test. All right, pull this up. So when you have an AK, the first thing that you'll see is in some places they just meet like this. There's no like interlocking shapes. And so what I mean by interlocking shapes is, let's say we have two parts, right? It's like one is like this, one's like this. And this is non-interlocking. These parts have no connections of any kind. Now, if I were to make this shape go up here, now these two parts are interlocking because this line has parts going into this side and some going into this side. And so you can see here that technically some of these parts interlock, right? Like how the body is meeting here. And doing this can help to make things feel more integrated. So this side's pushing in, this one's pushing in, and there's interlocking. Where if you look here, it's not. And so it's not saying you always need to do it, but it can be a very nice thing sometimes. So in this case, I think I would have liked it a little bit more if instead of having some very harsh angles that feel a bit, I think just too harsh in general, like here it's just pointy. I would really like to see a bit more of a hard hard line here, so that way there's a it's not like just this completely diagonal angle and creating this point. I try to avoid points a lot because I think that they can look bad in designs sometimes. So in this case, I would have liked to see a bit more like this for an interlock. But that's just my personal opinion and preference. Now, secondly, though, I would build upon this relationship. So the biggest thing in design is to think about the relationship between parts, I think at least. Because, you know, like let's say you make a part, the other parts need to interact with that part, whether they're supporting them physically or visually, like how cool they look or how good they look or, you know, whatever. Like things go together, you know, nothing really exists in a vacuum so much. And so in this case, I would have really liked if you put a more of an emphasis on this separation between them and also integrated some of the forms ideas from this piece onto this piece. So right now it's like you have all of these form changes and they just have literally almost nothing to do with this piece at all. So there's a lot of stuff you could have done. Like for example, you could have transitioned this form somehow from this angle up here. You could have done something like this and then focused on how these parts interact. This is just like one of probably about 300,000 ideas of what you could have done here. And I would have also just shaved off like this part here on this angle So that way there isn't such a harsh point here. Like there was a really harsh point here, and I try to avoid this a lot. I don't think it'll look good. And then clustering your details on some of these intersections can also look good, in my experience. And then watch out for evenness. So here I just created evenness between these two parts. So in this case, what I would probably do is make one of them smaller. And then just try and simplify things a little bit more and focus on interlocking them. So like you have cool ideas, but I think you make them too busy. Like I would try and do a few things and do them very simple. So for example, we have the selector fire switch. Instead of having like a detail here, 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 have maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4 or something details and support those better. So like having the form change that supports the idea and the function of this switch, and then having, text that says like one shot, two shot or something, or like, you know, like so instead like having a group of functional detail clusters. So like all of these details, this form change, these two decals, they all support this idea. And it'll help simplify the gun design, make it more easy to understand, but also make the detail that you have feel much more important. I like that you didn't make this front piece even. You divided it like so that this part is smaller than this one. I think you could have done it maybe a little bit more. And the attachment is cool, but I think you still need to maybe simplify some of your designs in general. One other thing, mm, yeah, especially like here, I just feel like your bevels in general need a little bit more polish. All right, one other thing that's kind of a thing that's important is don't make too many parts that are like very close to edges like this. Try and give your details breathing room for the edge, the lines to flow around the shapes that when you do insets. So like if you have one where it's like right on the edges, it's not going to look nice. Instead, I would do something that's like has a bit more rest space in between. Very important to think about the buffer space in between parts. How even are they, how organized are they, and how big are they? So here it's very, very small and it makes it look a bit strange. And try adding bevels to them as well so that they're not just hard edged. Like here, I would also avoid it. Adding some more smooth bevels here would have been really nice too. Some nice big form change, and then blending these two pieces together. In general, I would also try and avoid just making stuff too boxy. Like these all these details feel very boxy and like you went into detail too quickly without figuring out your main forms. Where actually the stuff up here looks a little bit less like that, but in general, I think you have a tendency to rush into detail too quickly, judging by your model. And I mean, it's also good too to contrast order with chaos. So like reuse a few of your details for order and then place them or in an organized way. And then sometimes having a few randomly placed details will help give a fake appearance of function because, you know, real clean designs are never perfect or like organized, you know? Sometimes stuff needs to be there just because of function. But yeah, so hopefully that's helpful. That's my critique on this piece. As far as the render, you can see, I think, where there's a lot of areas just in general that have way too much detail that's random. And then you need to focus on your bevels quality a bit more. One last thing also, I feel like try to make sure that your parts look like they belong together more. Like the scale of this piece looks, in my opinion, a bit too large for the pieces that it goes connects to. I think it would have looked a bit better if like they were a bit more streamlined. Like something like this, and try to avoid using points again. You have a lot of pointy areas in your designs, like here, if I were to do this shape. Like even just making this a bit more flush, I think will help. I'm just simplifying it just a bit. I really feel like the proportions of this piece are a bit too large and don't really match the rest of the gun. Getting some more negative space in there might be nice. Simplifying here. One other thing I noticed, I think you really need to work on your graphic design skills when it comes to decals. And I mean, I know it's difficult and it's not really a prerequisite for being a 3D artist, but things like this, like I always struggled with it a lot when I was starting out. Like this is good, but these ones are kind of like all over. Like this, for example, is really, really bright. And then this is like very, very thin, strange font. Like I wouldn't use a font like this. I would try and find one that fits the feeling that you're trying to create with this design. And I have to say there are some nice things that I do like. Like I like that this space here is where this piece comes in. That's actually a really nice detail. But I just would like to see a lot more polish overall to the design, like cleaner, and a bit more organization. And then I would also focus on materials. So like right now everything kind of feels like plastic and kind of the same. And I'd like to see a bit more metal stuff. Like even the metals feel like plastic a bit. So yeah, hopefully this is helpful critique. And you know, I'm glad that you submitted this. And I will be sending you a shirt. All right. Yep. So next one. You know what? I apologize. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce your name. Uh, because I probably will sound more like an asshole if I try to pronounce your name than if I do and I say it really, really, really wrong. But yeah, so overall, as far as shapes go, I think this is really cool. Like it's very, very unique. I like the form factor, the fact that it's very unusual. I think that's really great. So let me just save this out. And I don't care about the render so much right now. Um, yeah, overall, I think you're doing a very good job at breaking up a lot of these these bevels. Like you'd clearly, I think, understand pretty well how to block out and you know, not let bevels, like detail bevels, get in the way so much. And I think the overall form factor you chose is really interesting. Like it's very unique. Actually, I absolutely love this shape here. I I like that it's such a large shape change. And then it also has like these curved areas in the back. It's very nice. I don't see forms like that a lot, and I really love them. But I think I think one area besides the design right now that you really do need to improve is your renders. Let me look at the rest of your profile and maybe I can give some more clear feedback. Yeah, definitely. Like I love this design. It's not perfect, but I love this shape idea is fucking fantastic. And there's some really nice details on it. Like this is actually fucking awesome shape idea. How you mixed all of these cylinders and then also added the spherical element, like negative form. I don't know how to describe that actually, but that's fucking cool. Like for real. Um, but yeah, overall, looking at your art, I think rendering is something that you need to work a bit harder on. Like a lot of these materials are reading quite odd. Like they don't really feel like anything. And I think it's a problem. And I also think the lighting overall is a bit too blown out. So I mean, I'll look at a more recent work, but like I see you in uni. Let's see. Yeah, even this, like a lot of your stuff, everything on here looks like plastic and it probably is, but a lot of your lighting is very blown out. I feel like let me do a value. Oh, is that a sketch? I like sketches. Oh, nice. Um yeah, so let's take a look at the values really quick of say this piece. So I mean, you can see in a lot of areas it's kind of blown out, and also there isn't a lot of dark areas. Let me go back to here, see if I can do some quick editing. And I think that's fine generally, but I think that you could be handling it just a little bit better. And actually, I don't know if I have give me a second and I will play with this and try and articulate what I'm saying, what I'm thinking. Yeah, I think even just like this, like just turning down that brightness just a little bit keeps that stuff from looking so blown out, and I think it helps a lot. And I think overall though, the colors feel a bit milky and the values like I actually don't know why. Like maybe it's the renderer you're using. Looks like probably Keyshot or something. But overall a lot of the colors feel kind of milky, and I think you know what I think I know why it's bothering me maybe. Uh if I had to guess, I'm guessing that you have no natural colored lights, like lights using the Kelvin scale for giving color, warmth, and coldness. And because you're mixing it with a colorful light that doesn't exist in nature, it's going to feel very unauthentic. Like I think that all of this green is coming from a green light in the back. And you have to remember that in reality, this type of light doesn't exist, and so by default, it's going to take your believability out of the render just a little bit, I think. And I think if you're going to do this type of stuff, like you should support it also with a little bit of post-processing. So in this case, let's see, I have to use this new UI for this, but I'm gonna try and change the hue. Yeah, so you can see when I change it to a natural blue, it feels a bit more natural, but then I'm also going to make the shadows just a bit blue. Just a bit, just to support that blue light. And then the highlights, I'm going to probably do like just a slight opposite tone, because generally, I mean, maybe I'm not right about this, but generally I would say, when you have a cold shadow, you're probably gonna have a warm highlight. Uh, but yeah, so just think a little bit more about value. Try not to wash stuff out and try and represent your materials a bit better. Yeah, so this is looking cool. It's pretty difficult to critique because I feel like there's some really awesome things and then some things that are a bit hard to quantify that I think could be better. So I'll try and define what those are. It's like it's very subtle. I think a lot of the things. First of all, I feel like when you use a lot of these random sci-fi shapes, they feel very they feel very cheap. Like I don't know what they are. And I think also your use of orange is just a bit too much. Like I would try and maybe use less like stringy shapes of orange. Like you have a lot of like long stringy orange pieces or small pieces. Instead of doing this, what I would consider doing is I would consider doing something like this. So let me make everything black and white really quick. And I think this is going to make it look a lot more clear, or like I don't know, more unified maybe would be a best way to say it. Let me just make it so I can add color. All right, cool. So what I would do is, if you look at stuff like Metal Gear or something else similar, or some like Gundam characters or whatever on Pinterest, you'll notice a lot of times they have like solid blocks of color. And I think placing them in places where humans would interact and are very clearly marked are going to be helping to sell your design. Because uh, one thing that is super important, I think, in sci-fi is to try and follow the rules of the real world. And in the real world, a lot of times, color only indicates either danger or function usually when we're making stuff or we have like construction sites, because they're supposed to catch your eye and give you some sort of information like, okay, I should interact with this object or maybe I shouldn't or whatever. And so if you put too much all over randomly, it'll start to feel like a race car rather than a functional piece. And I feel like that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I would still try and do it in a way that feels more organized. Like on the handle is kind of cool. I like how you had it on the handle. I like how you had it around the screen. I think it's cool. So I mean, that's cool, but I feel like a lot of the other places, it would have been much better to do something more simple. The next thing I would say is you could break the box a little bit more, I think. There's some places you don't, and it's good, but I think you could still do it a bit more. And I think you need to work on your details. Like a lot of your details are these screws, and the problem I have with them is a lot of them feel very low tech, and also they're very bright. And so I used to always do this thing that I actually don't think is that cool anymore, where I would always have like bright screws for contrast. And I still do it. I'm still going to do it. But I think the thing that's actually funny about it is that it looks kind of cheap and shitty in my opinion. And I do it on a lot of my designs. And I think it looks a lot better when you try to simplify your designs a little bit more. So like one thing I like on this render here is you can see like this part. Um, yeah, I'm not gonna click that. Yeah, here. So I think it's really nice when the values of the main piece and the screws have some sort of similarity. And in a lot of times, there's a coating that will be on some bullshit. Like, I don't fucking know, like metal, whatever. It's coated, so it's darker and it's tinted. And that applies oftentimes, I think, to the screws. Like in this case, I wanted to not use screws too much. Okay, I lied. I totally did it on this piece. I am a liar, and but I think I balanced it fine because the metal, I matched it on the screws, but then I used like a different color around them to kind of push them off, like to separate them from the metal without it being too distracting. And on the white plastic, the plastic's already white, so it's kind of like a similar value to the screws already. And if you look actually, no, actually I lied. I did it, I think, I did it intentionally here. So my screws that are on the dark plastic, I made those a dark material because I wanted them to blend in and not pull so much of the attention away from the eye. Uh, and so I'm trying to like form like these harmonies between all of these values. And I think it's something that it can benefit you a little bit more. The next thing I don't like is you have a lot of very random shapes, and that's fine, but I don't think in this case they're working so much because, like, for example, it's very blocky. Like, if you look at this piece, like all this interior area, it's still the same flatness as the top area, like here. It's very difficult to explain, so, like here. And one thing you could have done to break the box a bit more is to, to match this shape here, because right now it's just like basically if we were to look at it from a profile view of this shape from behind, it would look like something like this, where if you had maybe integrated them like this a bit better, it might look interesting and you can play on cool ideas or about like you can play with cool ideas for how the shapes and forms interact. So in this case, like if you had made this form, this bevel, go backwards. So this plane is now at an angle. I think there's a lot of stuff you could have done, possibly, with this shape. I don't know. I mean, it's just a small thing, but I think overall you need to simplify stuff. Like you have a tendency to you interlock stuff. You follow a lot of the rules, but I think you just need to first of all try and break the box a little bit more elegantly, and secondly pay a little bit more attention to function. Like I think the shoulder goes here, right? So I think it'd be really nice. Like right now, this whole thing is very boxy as far as shape language goes, but having some sort of curved shape that could help to make this feel more comfortable, but also give contrast and believability. So right now, it looks like you're too locked into a box as far as shape contrast and form contrast goes. And also, one other thing I'm noticing is that you really only have two details, and that's bevels and circles, or sorry, insets and circles. So I think and you have a pipe or two, but I think it's really important. Like, you need to have a detail variety on your stuff that's a bit more broad. Like, you need more detail types, and not just details, but details that mean something. You know, like for example, if you look at like realistic stuff or even non-realistic stuff, like I try really hard to expand my visual library. Like I think about things in a few different ways. One of them is patterns. So like when you look at it, some sort of design or whatever, you could try and be like a product designer and give a reason for everything, which is fine. But when you're trying to pump out, like 3,000 things in a second or like a day or whatever, you have to do a bunch of iterations, some bullshit like that. You're trying to find a pattern that you can rely on to give a feeling as quickly as possible. And in this case, one of those ways that I like to think about stuff is break them down into different things. So you kind of have like few different things. One of those is pattern. Oh my God. So we got pattern, and then we've got like, let's say, uh, texture, details, and then you have like form. So these are kind of like, and then I guess you could do like graphic, graphics, like graphic design, text, whatever. So texture is going to be like, what material you have. So like some sort of like plastic or metals or whatever, and how you represent those. Or it could be something that's like patterning could be something like my gun is not here anymore. So patterning could be something like this. And you can do this in texture very easily. So that can also be patterning. These things, each of these elements, like good forms, each of these elements is basically kind of the building blocks you have to sell your design. And then so like screws, whatever. And graphics are like, some text. So these are a few different ways that you can sell your design. And what's important is to try and think about all of these elements at the same time. So while you're designing, you need to think, how is my textures, how is my materials going to sell the idea? What details should I use? Like, I know it sounds obvious, but if you really think about it, be conscious of what details you're using. And you basically have slots, screws, random circles, and insets. And so I think it's important to try and like figure out, I guess you have a few other things, but in general, it's pretty consistent. Just try and increase your visual library. And I think picking details that are more from reference and real life are going to help you to break out of a lot of these habits. And also looking at proportions of them. So like I don't like that a lot of the screws are on both sides of these parts. It makes them look very low tech. And it also makes it look like they're too close together because the space between them is the same size as they are. And it looks unnecessary because I don't think screws would really need to be that big and close together on something like this. Um, and I know you're using Fusion, but I think you need to put a little bit more. Try doing different styles of insets, like different profiles. So like, for example, a lot of your insets are like this from the side view profile. So the light is hitting it here, which is fine, but you could also try doing stuff like adding like a rail to it, having a smoother edge here, or you could do like, more CNC'd look like this, subtle bevel here, just enough to reflect light. So there's a lot. I would just try and put a little bit more work into them, maybe break them up a bit with some details that break the light up. And then also think about your graphic design in the during the design stage a little bit more and put more work into, making them feel integrated with the design. But yeah, so I mean, overall, I think it's cool, but I think you definitely should improve in like bringing a bit more realism into your sci-fi designs and just a bit more cohesion, like unity to where you place things and why, and expand your visual library a bit more. But overall, it's really cool. It's a really unique shape, and I appreciate that about it a lot. So, and then I had two cool guns, or two, yeah. So that's all on that. And the next thing is these guns that were just sketches. Uh, I think they look super cool. I don't have a ton of feedback for them since you have so many varieties. Like I'm assuming not final designs, but overall, sketches. I like them a lot. I like that you're playing with different angles. Yeah, I don't really have any super big critique on these, so these are cool. Yeah, so uh the next monthly challenge is going to be on my Discord channel. Link will be in this post and probably on my YouTube, all that. I don't know where I'll be posting this. And yeah, so feel free to join up on that. Anybody can join my Discord, even if they're in the Patreon, but I think you have to be subbed to the Patreon on the lowest tier to participate in the challenges. And yeah, whoever wins will get a free t-shirt and maybe something more next month or whenever the end of it is. And then feel free to give me ideas, suggestions for rewards you guys would like. Maybe I can make a new t-shirt design. And yeah, the other thing that you'll get if you participate is everybody will get critique at the end of the challenge in a video like this. So I'm going to go through everybody's submissions and give feedback. So anyway, thanks for participating, guys. And I will, yeah, see you in the next challenge.